Election Day has arrived in Canada. I'm Ryan Funk here with you Multicultural to bring you your 2025 general election coverage. As Canadians head to the polls, we've been speaking with community members right here in Winnipeg to hear their perspectives. From hopes to concerns, they're sharing what matters most to them this election and what they want to see for the future of our city and country. Let's dive into the voices shaping our community with Krispin Ontong.
Okay, so Chris, thank you so much for coming to You Multicultural. We're happy to see you here in the studio. And today we're going to talk about elections. So specifically, we would like to focus on Filipino community. So how engages Filipino community in Winnipeg when it comes to federal elections?
Well, first of all, good afternoon as well to you, Taya, and Ryan, and to all of your listeners. And I'm really grateful to be here. I have to clarify though that I'm not speaking for the Filipino community, but I'm speaking as a member of it. So these are more of observations on my part.
Sure.
So you were asking me about how engaged the Filipino or Filipino Manitoban community is with regards to the election. I would say they are very engaged, and that comes from two reasons. One is because I did this thing for Elections Canada and Immigration Partnership Winnipeg, where I work. I came out with a Filipino translation to get out the vote from members of my community, and so far it's already garnered like almost like 6,000 views. So I can see the interest there with regards to participating in the electoral process. So that is a good sign. I'm just hoping that it translates to actual people actually going to the voting center come election day or early elections and casting their ballot. And the other reason for me to say that they're very engaged is because, for example, in Winnipeg North, where there's a concentration of Filipino residents in that federal riding, it's actually called like the heart of the Filipino community in Canada because per capita, that is the most number of Filipinos that live there. And I single it out because over there is a Filipino Canadian candidate running for member of parliament, and that would be Rachel Punzalan. So that creates a buzz among the community because one of our own is actually running to be a member of the House of Commons. And if you actually go to to that area, to Winnipeg North, you can see it's almost like a dead heat between the number of signages with regards to her and the incumbent, which is Kevin Lamoureux. And also, if you see people doing their door-to-door knocking, chances are you would see a lot of Filipino volunteers accompanying both candidates. So it's a toss up between the two. But whichever candidate the Filipino Canadians of Winnipeg North decide to elect, I can say that they're in very good hands. Um, because for one thing, the conservative candidate Rachel Punzalan is a respected lawyer, and she's a philanthropist, and she's a very active community figure. Whereas the incumbent Kevin Lamoureux, even though I used to work for him, um, I can say that he's very well connected to the community because he conducts regular town hall meetings, usually via Zoom. So a lot of people can actually participate. So and on top of that, he's very well known, even up to Ottawa, that he does this like Saturday thing over at the local fast food joint there. So you can actually have a one-on-one, face-to-face meeting with your own MP and give him a piece of your mind or ask for some help or just talk about anything that's concerning you with national issues. So that's why he's very well connected. So it's a very interesting contest over there, and that creates like a sense of involvement in the Filipino community.
Yeah, and that's great to hear that there is a proactive Filipino community here in Winnipeg, and they really would like to fight for somebody from their community to represent their interest on federal level. So, what do you think are the main issues or concerns of Filipino community they would like to address?
I would say top of mind for the Filipino community would be just unique to them would be immigration. because as we all know, the immigration numbers have been halved. So people who have family, who have relatives who are wanting to come to Canada and share that so-called Canadian dream, they might have to wait a longer time to be able to satisfy the more stringent process now. So they're probably wanting to hear from a candidate who would like to raise the level of immigration, maybe at when they win, or at some future point. And apart from immigration, definitely, um, all Filipino Canadians feel what other Canadians are feeling in terms of the rising cost of goods and what's going to happen to their jobs because of this tariff tension between Canada and the U.S. And in areas where a lot of Filipinos are living, especially here in Winnipeg, and I'm not sure about the rest of Canada, but a lot of them live in areas where public safety is a concern. I heard a Filipino Canadian say that there was a time that he remembers that you can actually leave your door unlocked even at night and you don't have to worry about it. Nowadays, that doesn't happen anymore because of the level of crime and public safety. So I would say those are the things that are top of mind. And then further down the list would be, things like infrastructure, the condition of the roads, condition of bridges and public buildings. So those are the things that they encounter every day, whether they commute or they have their own vehicles. They're affected by all the construction that's going on, or the lack of construction that's going on, and the poor state of some roads here in Winnipeg, and we all know that. So they're definitely affected by that. But that would be further down the list.
So, Filipino community in Winnipeg is very strong, very hardworking, as many other ethnocultural groups who lives here in Manitoba. So they really have strong leadership here as well. So, what would be the role of Filipino community leadership in this civic processes? How do they encourage the younger generation of Filipino community to participate in elections or any other civic processes?
That's a very good question. So, in terms of being engaged in the electoral process, being or the likelihood of participating in it, that cuts across generational lines. You have Filipino Canadians who are first generation immigrants, like myself, and then you have Filipino Canadians who grew up here, so they identify more as like Canadians, not Filipino Canadians, but they live in a Filipino Canadian household. They're the ones who are for the younger set. It doesn't take a lot to get them, to participate, because usually they move in social circles where it's a mix of different cultures, and they think more like local Canadians. But if we focus more on the first generation Filipino Canadians, they are influenced by religion, because we are predominantly Catholic culture coming from Asia and having been colonized by the Spanish for 300 years. So a lot of us come here with conservative values. So a lot of us, like, there would be a sizable chunk of the Filipino Canadian voters who identify with conservative candidates because of that background, that religious conservative background. But to lead, your question was to lead the younger generation. It's a mixed bag, actually. Sometimes it kind of turns them off when you try and coax them into doing stuff like that. But what I observed was we usually lead by example. So when we have events, community events in the Filipino community, we try as much as possible. We try to be as visible and as vocal about it, and as and being proud about it, and sharing about it with the wider community here in Winnipeg. For example, whenever we have June, which wherein we celebrate Filipino Heritage Month, yeah, we create a lot of noise about it, and then we go to different stations, and we reach out to the media to promote all of our events. So that's how we try and, inspire the younger generation that, try and find out more about your Filipino identity, because for most of them they've lost it because they're interacting more with local Canadians. But that would be the opportunity right there. Now, when it comes to the elections, like an electoral process, it's kind of tricky because when it comes to divisive topics like that, because there are so many choices, right? You can either vote conservative or liberal or NDP or green. When it comes to divisive topics, our culture is actually non-confrontational. We don't like to talk about non. We don't like to talk about divisive topics, so we avoid it altogether unless you get a sense of. I guess when you read the room and you get a sense of, oh, like, okay, so we all have the same values, so probably we're gonna vote all the same way. Then that's when you can openly talk about it. But it's very challenging to coax people into actually participating or getting them to vote a certain way. So you might get a lot of pushback when you do that.
Okay, so you mentioned languages. So you mentioned that you translated lots of information about the election to Filipino community. So I know that Elections Canada this year translated the materials about the election instructions for more than 50 different diverse languages, which is fantastic. So can you mention any other barriers Filipino community faces, like language? Yes, it could be. Any other barriers in election processes which would prevent them from participation in civic processes? It could be
I
like
would
access
say,
to the information or trust or anything else.
yeah, I think one barrier would be a sense of history. I mean, that would be our disadvantage compared to Canadians who grew up here, because when you ask them about, so who are you going to vote for, like, or maybe tell me who you're leaning for, then a local Canadian would say, like, oh yeah, well, in so and so I voted for back in the 1980s, like when the conservatives were in power, the blah 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 blah, and then followed by, like, when the liberals won, then they did this and they did that. So they have that sense of history that influences and informs their vote. Now you compare that with somebody coming from the Philippines, like especially a first generation one, we don't have that because we normally study for the citizenship, right? And that part of electoral history is not included there, even though we wanted to. It all depends on the person if they did their research, like what happened back in the 90s, how were things run, or what happened back in the 2010s, or so on and so forth. So that is a major disadvantage for a lot of people here. And sometimes they just go by gut feeling, or they go by track record, like the most recent one. For example, like right now, the one that's in power are the liberals. So they just try and see, like, are we satisfied by the track record of these liberals? Yes or no. So they're gonna vote based on that, but they don't have the capability to reach back into history and see, like, what were the circumstances then when this particular party was voted into power. And I think that should be taken into account. But unfortunately, like I said, um, that's something that differs greatly among not just the Filipino Canadian community, but I guess with a lot of the ethnocultural communities as well.
100%.
Yeah.
I agree with you. So I think the educational component is important. So we have to inform people, we have to educate them about the election procedures and processes here in
Yes,
Canada.
yes. Thank you for pointing that out. Yes, because that's something that I overlooked because I was the head of the Philippine Association in Steinbach. And back in 2019, I always get a question like, who are we going to vote for? In 2019, that was when the federal and the provincial elections were held in the same year. So for people who weren't, who didn't get their schooling here, then they don't know what the difference is between the candidates. Like, why am I going to vote for this guy? Or am I going to vote for this guy in the federal elections? No, he's running for the provincial elections. What is the difference between the two? So that part is missing. Yes, so I agree. The educational part is also missing, not just the historical part, but just the basic difference between the two and what voters are supposed to look for, and voter expectation is also key there, because sometimes when they vote for candidates, they're gonna they're gonna use certain parameters like, I don't think he's this particular candidate is tough on crime, or like he's not looking after what's happening here in terms of crime, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of blah blah blah. But then, if you really think about it, that is more the like the responsibility of probably a city ward, like a councillor, or it might be the responsibility of a an MLA, for example. So they need to have that like civics 101 education to be able to understand the political system in Canada. But a lot of them, but to be fair, a lot of them they exert the effort in terms of understanding that. So hats off to them, because they're not ashamed in asking people like, who do I vote for? Because they're trying to look for people who are more knowledgeable, and then they don't just go there like blindly and then vote whomever. So I credit them for that.
Yes, and I can tell you that you Multicultural and you Radio are two beautiful platforms, media which represent ethnocultural and indigenous groups, and we are the bridge between Elections Canada and ethnocultural diverse groups here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and across Canada. So I think that would be just amazing to have somebody like you who could come and maybe just provide the information to their communities through our channels. Based on our experience, just wanted to mention, we invited all candidates here in Manitoba to attend and to give the interview to you Multicultural to explain their campaigns and initiatives. Unfortunately, just some of them responded, just a few of them responded. So, which is not what we expected, right? So maybe next time we will have better success. So now, as a leader, one of the leader of Filipino Canadians, so what would be your message to younger generations to improve their understanding of civic engagement and electoral processes?
I guess I would be that would be like influenced by what I'm fighting for. So I do have this advocacy after being the head of the Filipino Association. I couldn't turn the switch off. I remained active, and I tried to encourage and inspire, if possible, people to become more civically engaged in civics and become more aware of the issues that affect not just our like ethnocultural community, but the broader Canadian society. So, and the way I do that is by, for one thing, I created this platform called Barangay Canada, which is more of like a curated news blog about stories that would be relevant for the Filipino community, so that it would resonate with younger generation. Like, oh, this thing affects me, so I need to know more about it. So I need to form an opinion about it. So when there's a discussion that happens, I can contribute to it and probably try and offer some possible solutions, or I would have some insights that would enrich the topic even more. So that's one of the things that I do. So, and then I also make it a point to connect with other community leaders, because I don't have a monopoly of of great ideas. So, and then also a lot of our community leaders here, especially in Winnipeg, have been around for far longer than I have been. So I benefit from their experience, I benefit from their wisdom, and then we come together, and then we try and come up with a statement, and talk to our younger generation about becoming more involved. And like I said, the Filipino Heritage Month, that's one way for us to bridge one generation with another, and to help them find, having pride in their ethnocultural identity. And that allows us to come together and have a conversation together. In fact, I remember seeing that for this particular Filipino Heritage Month, there's going to be a Mabuhay district conversation, and that particular topic is about creating like a Filipino district here in Winnipeg. So you have Chinatown,
Ah.
but is there like a Filipino town? So I
Mm-hmm.
think a couple of like like bright-minded Filipino Canadians have come together and tried to conceptualize something like that. And they included a lot of the senior leaders as well. So it's a great mix of different generations coming together to try and fulfill one exciting vision.
Thank you so much. Manitoba needs more proactive leaders like you for sure. Thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you, Taya. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks for joining the U Multicultural team for your 2025 election coverage. Want some more insights? Head over to u-channel.ca. And don't forget to vote.